Listen, and the other thing that I just this morning, listen, you know my view on Radio New Zealand News. Radio New Zealand News is paid for by you and me as part of Radio New Zealand. Essentially, its flagship is Radio New Zealand News, which it regards itself as sort of, oh, I don't know, the BBC of New Zealand. All right? It likes to portray itself 100% funded by the New Zealand taxpayer as the authoritative voice for the media in this country, carrying that sort of poobah reverence that, frankly, it probably merited in previous years. No, probably previous decades. Did it ever really merit it? Good point now. And it's cost us roughly $60 million of taxpayers' money. There isn't a skerrick of private money that goes into Radio New Zealand or to the news service that is a part of it. Well, ever since, and I have pointed this out on regular occasions, Radio New Zealand continues its crusade against the government, the ACT Party in particular, I think. I don't think I've ever seen a positive story for the ACT Party ever, or heard of one in the, 2 years now, since the election of a coalition government. In fact, they didn't even have the decency of a honeymoon period for this coalition government. They led the charge against it just straight away. And in two particular areas, Radio New Zealand News has decided that it's the opposition, nobody else. So it can't wait to get there first. And those two issues are education and the environment, where they have reporting teams with clear left-wing agendas. Now, the incredible thing about Radio New Zealand in both the education and the environment fields, Te Ao Māori would be another one. Actually, it's a third area where reporting teams have a clear anti-government agenda and have since the government got elected, is that they will only go to voices that amplify their particular polemic or political viewpoints. And here we go, on the education one yesterday and today, this morning. You'd be aware of the scrap currently between ACT Party leader and Associate Education Minister David Seymour and what he terms frequent flyer in Hagley School for troubled kids, I think, Principal Peggy Burrows, over what is, I have to say, literally a storm in a teacup, or in this particular case, a mouldy school lunch in a plastic container. Over the school lunch in Brogley. I don't want to bore you with that anymore. You've heard it ad nauseum, literally ad nauseum, for so long. And it wouldn't be an issue unless the principal of Hagley High School had decided to go and complain. So this was the person who, instead of trying to work out how did this happen and go through legitimate courses, flew off to the media because she has a clear anti-government agenda. Rangiora High School got rid of her, can I say. They sacked her as the principal. They had to pay out to her because they didn't go quite through the right process. But they lost confidence in her, the board of Rangiora High School. So that's why she ended up in this particular role. And she is clearly a left-wing, and you might argue activist left-wing school principal, as so many of them are these days. That's fine. And so it really started with a claim that wasn't tested by Radio New Zealand, weren't asked for a defence of, asked for a justification later of this particular school principal. And you've seen that play out. But this morning, and I just wanted to show you what I mean about you can curate a news item by the guests that you choose. The government are looking to impose, as part of the curriculum refresh and the admitted and acknowledged failure of the New Zealand schooling system over the last, 10, 20 years, to properly provide the fundamentals of education, particularly at primary school. Now, I have a certain sympathy, can I say, for secondary schools in this country who receive the product of 8 years of primary schooling in this country and are suddenly meant to convert this into success at NCA within 2 years. It's very difficult to arrest 8 years of teaching failure when you are receiving those kids into year 9 or our third form at school and expected them to get ready for some sort of national qualification in 2 years' time. Good luck. And most schools who receive try and make a difference at secondary school level, and most fail because it's, as I've said, arguing against essentially the received poor teaching of the last 6 years, or 8 years in actual fact, to try and make a difference. Fine. So the government is seeking to get some tests early. So it's going to say, listen, we want to pick up kids, particularly with the new phonics learning that the Ministry of Education is saying is really making a difference in a very short period of time. It's a seriously great news story. You won't see that seriously great news story being reported by radio news or many of the mainstream media, but the Ministry of Education having to say, God damn, this works. And it's really making a positive difference. And they're also introducing a maths curriculum because, well, we all know primary school women hate maths. Okay, so let's be honest about it. They're not only useless, most primary school teachers coming out of our female primary school teachers coming out of our universities, because universities taken over teacher training and not teachers' colleges who are specifically set up for that. But they also don't like maths, so unsurprisingly communicate that dislike to their charges. All right. So the government wants to introduce one test after about 2 years, a sort of uniform test to work out if those kids are actually learning the basics of mathematics so that they can identify them. So where does Radio New Zealand go when it discovers that now a second test is going to be created, and this one for basic maths comprehension? They go to Leah Panapa. Now, Leah Panapa runs a Maori primary school, or largely Maori primary school, I think somewhere in Northland, and she's principal of the New Zealand, she's the president of the New Zealand Principals Association, which I think is a full-time job for her now. From what I can work out, she's not a principal at the moment anymore. And this is what she said. And so they go to her and they go to somebody else. But these are the two people that they go to for expert comment on this government initiative. Leah Panapa, New Zealand Principals Federation, who says that kids are now being tested for testing's sake. So let me get this right. You've got two tests, one English, one maths in the first 2 tests a year, and apparently you're testing for testing's sake. Really? One test on average a year. And then she says that the phonics check was already introduced, and now this maths test, she says, where's the proof that the phonics test is making a difference? Yes, it gives us information, but we already know that kids need extra reading support. Can I say, Leah Panapa, as somebody who's been in the teaching primary sector for the last 30 years, if you knew, how come you did such a crap job at actually doing anything about it? Can I just say? Sorry, did I say that out loud? So she's not a fan. But then they go to a University of Canterbury maths education senior lecturer, David Pomeroy. Okay, this is to do with the maths test. Not a professor, not somebody steeped in maths education, but a senior lecturer at the University of Education, who says, and I wanted to quote you this directly because Radio New Zealand did quote him, lovingly I have to say, but all that is wrong with universities and why our kids can't read, write, and do basic maths. This is David Pomeroy, senior lecturer in maths education at the University of Canterbury. I'll read it out to you. And this is to do with the test. Quote, where it can go wrong is when a test becomes part of a child's identity. What? Where it goes wrong is when a test becomes part of a child's identity. I carry on. So this policy, to have a test, one test in the first 2 years of a child's life for maths, identifies children who are falling behind. Yeah, good boy, David, you got that. And then goes on, children can then internalize that label and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Let me get this right. We can't test kids at all as to what they are learning in primary schools and whether the information's gone through, or we need to identify those kids who need a bit of spelt, because if we test according to Maths Education Senior Lecturer David Pomeroy from the University of Canterbury, lovingly, and the only person quoted on this particular issue this morning by Radio New Zealand News, children can internalise that label and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, the obvious logic of that would be so you don't test at all, which essentially is what Pomeroy is saying. I then went and had a look at the University of Canterbury's biography of David Pomeroy. And then I went, oh my God. This is the person that Radio New Zealand News have decided is the authoritative critic of the government's policy to ensure that basic maths education is being imparted into our children at school. This is his background. And I am reading to you direct from the University of Canterbury. Quote, David Pomeroy uses approaches from sociology and gender studies to examine the relationship between who we are, in particular our social class, our ethnicity and our gender, and which school subjects we like and do well in. He's a former maths teacher, especially interested in educational inequalities in maths learning. He's not an academic then, he's a critical theory polemicist. But Radio New Zealand go to this frequent flyer whenever they want a critical critique of a government education initiative. And as for Leanne Otney, upon her election as the Principals Federation president, she had this to say: at the end of the day, I'm Maori. That's how I view the world, and I want to help non-Maori understand how they can enact the Treaty of Waitangi. Leanne, quote unquote, from the Principals Federation, champions equity, well-being, and a sustainable principal leadership, and has a proven record of mentoring and amplifying Indigenous voices. She speaks strongly on and for equity of education for Indigenous students. Forget the rest, apparently and presumably. So this is who Radio New Zealand go to when they want to go and get expert commentary on government initiatives. People who are philosophically and ideologically opposed to testing and who have a particular polemic view of the world that holds no bearing upon reality and has in good part created the problems that Erica Stanford and the educational reformers are seeking to redress. It's extraordinary, isn't it? So I'm just saying to you, we need to get rid of, I'll say it again, we need to get rid of Radio New Zealand. We need to get rid of Radio New Zealand News. We've got enough news in this country, enough sources of information. We do not need to be paying to be lectured to and propagandized and polemicized by a government agency that is taking money out of the back of our pockets to try and convert us to an ideological perspective that is so alien and has delivered so much damage in the schooling sector over the last 10, 20, 30 years. Those are my thoughts this morning. What are yours?